Hello and welcome to this edition of Curator with a Camera with me, Andrew McLean, which today comes to you from Locomotion in Sheldon in County Durham, where we're going to be looking at the prototype, not the advanced passenger train, but its rival, the high-speed train. In the 1960s, railways themselves were threatened with going out of existence completely. The railways were emerging from the damaging beaching cuts, which had cut so much of the rail network. There was competition from air and road as well. And there was even competition to the very traction of the railways too. Hover trains were very much being looked at as a potential symbol of the future. And there was a chap called Walter Jowett had argued very strongly for British Rail to use a more conventional high-speed train, which would have two power cars, two locomotives at either end of the train. Sandwiched in between would be the carriages. And at that time, British Rail were developing a brand new carriage called the Mark III, which was going to be the last word in safety, speed and comfort. So this was something that started to gather immense interest within British Rail because this would be a stopgap before the advanced passenger train could be put into service. And thankfully for British Rail as well, they had a new chief engineer of traction and rolling stock, a guy called Terry Miller. And Terry Miller is a great engineer. He actually did his apprenticeship for the London North Eastern Railway under the great Sir Nigel Gresley. So he was somebody that really knew about high speed. He was a greatly experienced engineer. And between Jowett and Miller, the concept of a new train capable of doing speeds of 125 miles per hour on the main line at a time when the fastest trains on the main line were only doing 100 miles per hour came into being. And Miller strongly argued that within 2 years he could have a working prototype up and running on the main line for testing. And this was achieved. And in 1972, this train emerged from the Derby Works where the carriages had been being produced and went into testing. Now the power cars themselves were built in Crewe, and so the locomotives, the Class 41s as they were designated, emerged from Crewe, were sent up to Derby to be reunited with the carriages, and then suddenly a ready-made train was available for prototyping testing on the main line itself. And this it did very, very successfully, to a point where very quickly a production train, a new train, was able to be put into service very, very quickly indeed. Prototype emerges in 1972. The first of the production trains appeared in 1976, running on the Western Main Line, and went to become a staple of Britain's railway network, still in use today under the famous brand name, the Intercity 125. So we're going to take a look on the outside of the locomotive, and then we'll do a little tour of the inside as well to see what makes this particular locomotive, part of the high-speed diesel train, so significant. So we're going to start off here at the back of the power car, try and point out a few highlights of what's underneath. And here you've got these tanks here. These are the main air reservoirs for the compressed air, which supplies all systems within the high-speed diesel train itself, the whole train. And we move around to the bogies here, and you'll just see a detail here named Girling. Actually supplied the brake discs, and they're quite a famous name in Formula One. So a well-known name from motor racing being used in a very fast train. And then we move across the bogies here. You've got a set of steps, and these steps actually lead up to the guards van, which we'll cover in a bit more detail later on. And come through, just have a little bit more look here at the bogies, because this is an important part of the story. The bogies, lightweight but incredibly strong, really are the things that help to make this vehicle go as fast as it eventually did. Because what you've got to remember about this is that there's a power car, a locomotive at either end of the train with the carriages in between. So the train's moving forwards, one of those locomotives is going forwards, but the one at the back is going backwards. So very complex system, but the braking system was one of the great innovations of this train, made it work so successfully. And as we move round, that brings us to this box here. This is for the batteries, so it doesn't look like much, but very, very important for the power car itself. And in fact, this little box here, if we can go into a little bit of detail, just talks about battery charging point here. Shed lighting socket as well. And that's just above the main fuel tank here. And you can see the actual gauge for the amount of fuel, empty today of course. It shows you how much fuel would be in there. And of course here we have, unscrew that to get the fuel in. This runs on diesel of course. So it was known as a high-speed diesel train originally, until the diesel was dropped and just becomes high-speed train. And then we have more air here with the air compressor. And finally the front set of bogies. Same really as the back, more of these curling disc brakes. And famously you would get this sort of smell coming through the air conditioning system caused by the braking. Always very, very distinctive. You always knew when you were on an HST when that happened. So now we're just going to move around to the front of this HST power car. We want to talk about the design of the cab itself. I'm just going to stand back a little bit because you can see something that's on the top. You'll see there's a little recess on the top of the cab there. And that actually conceals the main air horns, so the warning horns. That's where they are. Because it's something about the design of the front here where everything's kind of concealed as much as possible. This has been designed by somebody that really knows about design. And that's because British Rail wanted this train to look like nothing else on the rails. And this is why they appoint a famous industrial designer called Kenneth, later Sir Kenneth Grange, to come and design the livery first of all for this vehicle. But later Kenneth starts to design the nose, the shape of the front of the train as well. This is one of many designs he'd worked on using a system of models that he'd created and tested in wind tunnels at Imperial College in London, trying different shapes to see which was the most aerodynamic. The windscreen is a very important part of this story. This was a time of a lot of vandalism on Britain's railways, and so the windscreen had to be fitted with 25mm armoured glass, and that's what you have here in case anyone throwing things at the windows. So that's the windscreen. You've got the wiper there and the sunscreen as well, which will come down. We'll see when we get inside. Now let's go down to the bottom half of the windscreen, which actually conceals the lights. So I'm going to try and see what we can see here. You've got the main headlamp, complete with the British Railways symbol, the double arrow. And above that you have the tail lamp. That would be red, because of course sometimes this train was being led by this power car, and other times the other power car would be leading and this would be at the rear. And then either side of the headlamp there are two, you can just sort of see them here, the reflection, don't quite see them, two marker lights. Originally there used to be 3 marker lights in here before the headlamp later was added. So that's important. Now there's nothing to couple up as far as you can see here to other locomotives. Got the buffers, we'll come to those in a minute, but this hatch actually conceals the draw gear, which is actually just hanging down various pipes there as well for connecting up to other rail vehicles. It's very much part of this design that Kenneth Grange was trying to create a locomotive that was very smooth, very beautifully designed, that looked good. It wasn't just fast, but looked the part as well. And he had real problems because of the buffers. The buffers were a real issue for him, sticking out. He tried to conceal them or make them look more stylized here. But famously on the production train, he was able to get away with no buffers at all. And that completely transformed the look of the front of the production trains. Whereas the prototype very much ran with buffers. So that's the cab front. And let's go just round the other side now, just have a little look at what else is there, because Kenneth, although he designed the front of the cab, that wasn't his original commission. His original commission was the livery itself. And then we'll see here, the front we've got the yellow, which is the warning colour that you see in all locomotives of this time. But actually the livery this has been turned out in is called British Rail's Pullman livery of the time. It's effectively the reverse of the corporate colours of British Rail's other carriages, which were predominantly blue with a grey stripe that went across the windows. This is reversed so that the blue becomes a stripe and the grey becomes the predominant colour. And that was true for the whole of the train. The carriages were painted in the similar fashion. And it's the same too with the advanced passenger train. Later, the production train goes to the more normal blue-grey, but Kenneth Grange himself redesigns the livery for the power cars. So they're very, very distinctive, even though they are within British Rail's corporate colours. The driver's cab door on the right hand side, actually for Neville Hill Depot, where this vehicle was based and would later be restored. And its number, 41001. That's because this was a Class 41 locomotive. But later, this was designated as a train, a 252 set. So is this a locomotive or is it a train? Well, it's a bit of both really. And then later still, just to add to the confusion, this was reclassified again back to being a locomotive rather than a power car for a train as a Class 43 in line with the production power cars. And this was numbered 43000, which explains why the first production power car is 43002, because 000 and 001 were used by the prototypes in a later numbering system. But this is its most important, significant number, which has been restored to, as you can see when I'm going round. And then just on the outside as well, you'll see there's lots of grills and louvers. That's just to aid with the cooling, the expulsion of the fumes, of course, from the engine. The British Rail double arrow that we see behind this sign, which if we move around, probably get a better view of. Painted very largely on the side here, very distinctive, much larger than anything else you would see in the railways at the time. Guards compartment, which we'll be going into shortly. Double doors, because this also took luggage, so large parcels and so on could be taken in there. And then this window at the back is actually for the, not just the guards compartment, which is you see in the initial production high-speed trains, power cars, but also this window at the back's got a windscreen wiper on it. Why is that? Because this was actually a driving position as well. We'll see that properly when we get inside. But for low speed shunting, for example, sometimes this could be driven from the rear of the power car, something that the production trains didn't have. So that's quite an interesting point as well. So that concludes a sort of tour of the outside of the locomotive. But let's get inside and see what makes this tick. So here we are inside the cab of the prototype HST power car. And I think the first thing that you start to see in here is just the layout of the cab. If you remember, this was made in 1972, so just 4 years after the last steam locomotive hauled a service on the main line of British Railways. Very, very different cab to what you'd get with a steam locomotive, of course. And this was when designers and engineers were starting to look at the ergonomics that were involved with cabs as well, and that was something of great interest to Sir Kenneth Grange also. So it kind of owes itself a bit more to, say, an aircraft or a Formula One racing car rather than traditional trains. There's a whole series of panels and switches and gadgets here. I mean, here's the various switches for the various lights, the automatic warning system or the sunflower that you see there. Part of the safety systems come down here. Parking brake, the symbol of the Westinghouse Company. Very, very famous name in railway history there. When this train was designed, it was designed with this central driving position. And that's great for the driver because you have all your controls in easy reach. All the dials here. We have the brakes, going for the different notches, the emergency brake, which you strike in the event of a serious emergency, the various warning lights here on either side, the power controller as well, the throttle, which makes this thing work, getting up to really high speed. Another area here, this is where the switch for direction of travel, and the all-important horn, which gives that distinctive two-tone horn there. Now you can do low or high loud. You would be doing low when you're coming to a station or in a built-up area, loud when you're out in the countryside, and these things really were loud. Important control as well with the guards, so that telephone is very, very important for there. Everything's laid out, but also quite unique. I mean, a bit unusual for us to think about nowadays, but this was back in the 1970s. Even got an ashtray here in the cab for easy reach for the driver, if needs be. But above here, maximum speed 125 miles per hour. So important And that leads me on to the speedometer. And you'll see here, that speedometer has that speed all the way up to 150 miles an hour. Well, this was a 125, or became what became the 125. So what's that all about? Could this train go much faster? Well, in testing, yes, it absolutely did. And this is a key part of the story. Because on the 12th of June, 1973, this achieved a world speed record for a diesel locomotive when it achieved a speed of 143.2 miles per hour between Darlington and York, the famous racing stretch of the East Coast Main Line. And that record was truly notable. Because this is something that's always intrigued me about this train, is I was told by somebody inside of British Rail a few years ago that actually the train went much faster than that speed. That was the official speed, but on that run it achieved a speed a little bit higher than that. And British Rail deliberately pegged the speed back because there was concern that a speed that was getting closer to the speeds envisaged by the Advanced Passenger Train could put the APT, Advanced Passenger Train project, at risk. Now, whether or not that's true or not, I don't know, and we're not ever get to prove it. But without question, 143.2 was still a world record. A very notable world record too. So this train really proved itself. But this central driving seat has another story as well, because prior to those test runs for a whole year, this train was blacked by the unions. The unions refused to drive this train because it only had a single central seat for the driver. Back in the days of steam, you had two men on the footplate, the driver and the fireman. The question of the second man became a big issue for the unions. And they blacked both the Advanced Passenger Train and the high-speed train prototype because they had only a single position for a driver. And eventually that cost both programs a whole year of work, development and testing. Now that was less of an issue for the HST, which was already a fully formed train effectively, but for the experimental Advanced Passenger Train, that was a devastating blow and really set the project back significantly. But as I get up from the seat, you'll see that actually there are now two seats. There's a seat directly behind the driver, and that's to allow for the second man. So the unions got their way in this regard. This just folds down. And if I sit in it, you'll see actually, you're sitting right on the shoulder of the driver. It must have been quite annoying for a driver actually to have the second man there. So when the production power car came into service in 1976, the new production train had a much wider cab designed by Kenneth Grange, and you had two seats side by side for the driver and the second man. And the other thing the unions had insisted on as well for the production train was cab windows at the side, because as I sweep round here you'll just see it's a blank wall, and that was deemed to be a safety issue, and also just for the comfort of the driver as well, make a nicer cab environment. So you'll see in the production train a bigger windscreen because the technology had moved on for the armoured glass, enabled Kenneth Grange to design that, and also the side cab window as well. I mean, there are these drop lights in the cab doors, but those are big changes to the production train from the prototype. But this is where it all happened in 1973, when this train went into history as the fastest diesel train in the world.
British Rail's prototype high-speed diesel train, number 252001. The same train that on June the 12th, 1973, set a world record for diesel by attaining a speed of 143 miles an hour on the East Coast Main Line between Thirsk and Tollerton. The start of yet another chapter in this long history of locomotion, which all began here on September the 27th, 1825.
We're now going to go and see what's behind the cab. Now, we don't have any lighting in here. It's very dark and very narrow, so it's going to be quite a short sort of look through each section as we work our way through to the back of the vehicle. But just to sort of explain, this area I'm in now is a sort of clean air compartment. This is where all the electrical equipment is kept. In the cubicle, which is behind me here, but again, it's quite difficult to sort of see, but we're going to walk our way through this corridor and just pause on the way to look at a few interesting features as we go through. Now here, you can hopefully just see just on the shadow there. This is the alternator, which helps to generate the electricity. You can just see a little bit of that there, but it's very large and it is attached to the engine, which is in the next compartment. So you can see up here, there are clearer light panels as well on the roof to enable greater light to come in. And you also have the louvers as well, which should emit some natural light, but yeah, it's a very, very dark space in here. But this is the alternator made by Brush of Loughborough, very famous name in British Railways. So we're going to come into now to the beating heart of this vehicle, the engine room. Now, I told you it was narrow. We're having to breathe in here. But what you see here is the engine made by Paxman of Colchester, the famous Paxman Valenta engine, which gave this distinctive screaming sound, such a distinctive sound from the high-speed train itself. And this provides 2,250 horsepower. Now these trains, to enable them to go so fast, needed 4,500 horsepower. And this provides half of that because, of course, there was an engine in the other power car too. So between them, they were able to provide the necessary power. But the engine itself here is not the original. This engine has actually seen service in 2 production power cars and was put into this vehicle by a group called the 125 Group, who restored this power car to working order. And the reason for that is the original engine here was sectioned for display purposes after this vehicle came out of service in the 1980s. So this isn't the original. And because of slight differences in design, one of the big challenges the 125 Group had to overcome was fitting it to the alternator, which is the original. Did a fantastic job of that. And that group today are now running production high-speed trains in preservation. They are keeping the story of the 125 alive on the main line. And I'm going to move into much more open space now, which is actually the luggage van, part of the guards compartment, which is separated into 2 sections. And what we see here is this door, which can open up, double door, because these trains would be carrying parcels, be carrying goods, even Royal Mail at the time. Sometimes those packages would be quite large, so the ability to open not 1 door but 2 would come in handy. And there's actually a lot of storage space in here. You can see the doors replicated on either side, of course, so you can load up from either left hand side or right hand side. And then through this sliding door you actually have the guards compartment itself. So let's have a little look inside and see what accommodation the guard had. Well, it's quite a small space, and actually you have the vestibule end here. This connects on to the carriages behind, because of course the high-speed diesel train, it wasn't just a power car. There were 2 power cars and originally 10 carriages were built for this train. 2 of them later getting taken out of service because they were converted for use by the royal family. So one of the prototypes carriages became the carriage of the Duke of Edinburgh. So he has a lengthy association with the prototype. And the other carriage for his wife, the late Queen Elizabeth. And those royal carriages remained the carriages for the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh throughout their lives. So a nice royal connection to the high-speed train prototype. And here we have a nice comfortable bucket type seat, the obligatory ashtray in the window here, and also looking out the window there's that windscreen wiper we looked at earlier, and some of these controls indicate that actually this is a driving position also. Not the same as the driving position in the main cab, because this was very much for short moves in shunting yards and so on. And this was a feature of the prototype which wasn't seen in the production cars as well. So you could drive it from either end, but certainly nowhere near 125 miles per hour. And as we move round, we'll see that that's not the only seat in here, because there's a little fold down seat just here. And that enables the guard to use this desk, in which all sorts of bits of paper and so on could be kept inside there. And once you'd finished writing out those slips, he's got the mesh holder here to put things in. And actually you can just sort of imagine that sitting down here. You get a nice window and a nice little bit to scribble off some details, your signature and so on. And also here, just while I'm sitting, you can see the red cabinet, make it very distinctive, because this is a tool cupboard, an ambulance box, important in case of any injuries or accidents. And at one stage there'll be a ladder here as well for evacuating the train in emergencies. So there's an awful lot gets packed in to this power car. We've got the driver's position, you have all the equipment inside, including the Paxman Valenta engine, that engine that makes this go, the screaming heart of this particular vehicle. And then at the back you have the luggage van and the guards van also. This train was built on a shoestring budget, and that's incredible to think the value that it's brought, the transformations it's made in its production life to the economies and societies of towns up and down this country shows that surely this must be the most successful British train design of all time. And not only is it a record breaker in terms of speed, it looks good too. The prototype stands as testimony to the engineering vision of Walter Jowett, the engineering brilliance of Terry Miller, and the design magnificence of one of Britain's greatest industrial designers, Sir Kenneth Grange. Well, we do hope you've enjoyed this episode of Curator with a Camera, and if you have, please do like and subscribe. Watch out for another episode coming soon.